Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank you for coming out tonight. I know everybody has a busy schedule. We certainly appreciate you taking time out of yours to come and visit with us tonight and give us some input. My name is Steve Patz. I'm the superintendent of the Franklin Public School District. And I'd like to introduce a couple of people that I can't introduce everybody that's at all the tables. They'll do that on their own when you get there. But I'd like to introduce Mike Cady. He's the high school principal. Bob Weigert is from Epstein and he's the lead architect from the firm that we are working with. Megan Marie, raise your hand, that's our communications specialist. And Terry West is right here at this table right here. She's our middle school principal. Tonight's format is very, very simple, and it has one intent behind it, and that is for us to listen to you. We do what's called a World Cafe format. You're at tables purposely for us to be able to have you share ideas, generate ideas. There is no wrong idea, no right idea, and we want to hear anything and everything you have to say. It's important that we get all the information we can. The people that are at your tables with laptops will be recording that. We'll condense all that and it'll be put up on the website. And we are videotaping this presentation, so it will be on YouTube as well, so people that aren't here will be able to communicate in another fashion. With the World Cafe, its intent is just simply to have everybody share ideas on what they're thinking, and that's what we're going to do with you tonight. Prior to doing a World Cafe, it's a normal process for us to share a little bit of information with you that may or may not have a bearing on any of your thoughts. The information we're going to share with you tonight relates to some of the preliminary work that we have done up to this point. We brought Epstein on as architects in October to start us through this process, to start doing an evaluation of where we're at, what we're doing, what we need to do, and those kinds of things. But at this point in time, there are no plans, there are no dollar amounts assigned to anything, because the information that we get from you tonight is going to be the catalyst for us going forward in terms of what we're going to do. There's a timeline involved in this entire process, and the first timeline that we met was hiring the architect and a construction management firm, and we hired C.G. Schmidt, and Dan Davis from C.G. Schmidt is here somewhere. Dan, he's in the back over there. And those people are brought on board so that when we need to get the information in terms of cost and all the different intricacies of things that we have to have specific information on, we have the experts that can do that for us. The other part of that is knowing what you want and need for information. So tonight is just the first step towards that. There's another one of these on March 19th at the middle school. At that time, it's going to be a build-off of what happens tonight. So all the information we get tonight, we're going to take and condense it down and see what the priorities and so on and so forth are. Bring our architects and everybody else on board to say, okay, we have to start creating a plan now. After we do that, we're going to put some conceptual ideas together, share those with you on March 19th, and then keep refining it as we go. There's a high probability we'll have another one of these in May when we're near the end. And at that point in time, we'll be getting close to where we either have to have a decision made by the Board of Education to go one direction or not. Prior to that, in about the end of March or early April, we'll be having another survey that goes out to the entire community so we get a real strong representative sample of what our entire community feels. And it could be do nothing, it could be do certain things, that's to be determined. But this is not a board-generated issue, this is not an administrative-generated issue. This will be a community-generated issue on what you will support and what you think is important for Franklin Public Schools. We're very proud of our school district. We're always looking for ways to improve, and some of that means we have to look to the future. For example, if we were to pass a referendum tonight, in all likelihood, we are about 2.5 years out from having anything in place. So some of the numbers you're going to see up here tonight represent some of the data that we have that represents current populations and so on. But when we get to the point where if we go to a referendum, there's no guarantee that we will do that. But if we were to do that, that would probably occur next November. Well, if that were to occur, then the remainder of next year goes into the planning process. Then you have another year for the building process. So when we say we're looking to the future, we're not looking to find something that's going to be a resolution for us for next year, because that's impossible. What we're looking for is the future down the road, what we have to do for our kids and for our community, and hopefully some of the information we get tonight, or that we give you tonight, will help you be spurring your thinking. But again, please don't be bashful with your ideas and your thoughts and opinions. If we don't know what your thoughts are, we can't react to them. And I will promise you that if you have questions, we will get them answered and share them with you through a number of media sources and so on, so that we have that availability to us. As I said, that timeline, it's been going through pretty quickly, so we do have to get a move on. And with that, I'm going to get a move on for tonight. One of the things that I want you to be conscious of, are some of the things that had been done previously. In 2005, there was a committee, a large committee in Franklin, that did some really thorough and extensive research on grade configuration and so on. And at that time, the Board of Education adopted a policy and a procedure to say that when there is time, when there is space, we want to implement a 6-8 grade configuration at the middle school. Research supports that, we support that, we think it's valuable, but that remains to be seen whether we can or will do that. So that happened back in 2005. In 2006, the Citizens Long Range Planning Group put together an awful lot of research on facilities and so on and so forth, which led to a 2007 referendum. At that time, the referendum called for a new high school. It was defeated at that time, but the needs that were expressed leading into that referendum have not gone away. Some of them have been enhanced, but there's been a process to this that dates back to 2005, and we just want to make you aware of what's going on. Along with that, in 2010, we did a pretty extensive, actually we did 2 surveys, but we did primarily dealing with facilities and trying to get a community pulse on what direction do we need to go, what direction should we go. And at that time, we had a very large turnout of over 3,000 respondents to that survey, and it told us many things. And that's what we're building off of as we enter into this process right now. And then in 2011, we entered into the fact that we have got to start doing something more formalized, because the planning won't go away, and it would be irresponsible for us to get to 2014 and 15 and not have addressed some of the issues that we have before us. And if we don't address those in a certain way, then we have to find other means and ways to do that. So there's been a history back in 2005 of some different things that have happened and taken place. And one of the biggest things that we do, that school districts do generally, is try to find out what sort of a trends in population and student population you have. We brought in a group called Applied Research Laboratory out of Madison to do a pretty extensive and thorough study for us, and that's online if you wanted to read it. And you'll see some of their numbers. In addition to that, the city on an annual basis does a study where they take a look at homes that are going to be built, spaces available, and all those kinds of things. And we blended up all of that together to try to come up with something that's reasonable in terms of expectations for future growth of our district. And you'll see a little bit of that data in just a minute. A historical perspective on what our student growth looked like. You can see that since 2002 was on the rise, and then it took a dip in 2007 and 2008, and now we are on the upswing. And our applied research data has indicated we're going to continue on with that upswing. And the reason I mentioned earlier about taking a look at where we're going to be in a couple of years, right now in 2011, you can see where that arrow indicates if the growth continues, we have to be planning for what's going to be here in 2015. That's 3 years away, and that would be the earliest we would probably be able to have facilities if we went that route. So we have to be looking long range, long term, to see what happens. Additionally, these are the current enrollments that are in our buildings, and Bob will explain some of the mechanisms we have in place and some of the ways that we calculate capacity and so on. But you can see at our high school and our middle school those numbers. You take note that we have Robinwood and Pleasantview that are getting up there in size. And we're a little bit concerned about that because if we do nothing, not next year, but the year following, there's a high probability we will have to redistrict and change our boundaries in a significant way because we just can't absorb any more kids into those buildings. There again, of course, unless we did something to make them larger, if that were to be the case. But so you have a perspective, that's the way that the whole trend is going. Our enrollment projections, you can see on the left-hand column under the current, from a K-6 perspective, that's where we're at. The 5-year trend is from the Applied Research Lab, and that tells us where we are projected to be in 5 years. And again, I want to remind you, that 5 years will be 2 years by the time we were to get anything done if we did do that. And then you can see the 10-year projection as well, and that gets the numbers up there pretty considerable so that we have to be able to take a look at, if we do something, we have to be conscious of what those numbers may need to be. And that study was done on January 13th, or completed on January 13th. Also on maximum build-out, that's a term that the city often uses and we reference quite a bit in terms of when will the capacity of Franklin get to the point where we have a pretty good idea of the maximum number of students we may have. Well, as you know, the Ryan Intercept project might have an impact on that in terms of increasing enrollment. Those are sort of unknowns at this time, but it's a likelihood to take a look at. So if you take a look at our current and applied research 10-year lab and then the build-out, and that's sort of an infant number out there, those are the numbers that we have to be thinking about as we look long-term. And I do think we need to look long-term as opposed to short-term in some areas. So we don't want to come back in X number of years and have people say, why didn't you do that in the first place in terms of building additional or doing something to accommodate some of the needs you might have. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Bob Weigert from FCNU, and he's going to talk about some of the information that went into getting us to this point in terms of the research and the data. Bob?
Sorry. So these are the things that we take a look at. When we come into a district, we need to really start to identify what are the needs, and we take a look at building capacity. And I'll come back to what we mean by that in just a moment. The other thing that we take a look at is the educational adequacy. And basically what that is taking a look at your learning spaces and determining whether or not they can support the curriculum that you're trying to deliver today and potentially the curriculum that you're trying to deliver in the future. We also brought in our engineers to take a look at the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems, and we've got a detailed report from them as well. We also brought in land surveyors to take surveys of the high school site and the middle school site so that as we do start to take a look at planning opportunities, we've got an accurate layout of what that property is. So how do we determine building capacity? There's really two approaches. Method one is described as taking your learning spaces and filling them up to capacity, if you will. So taking the board directed policy on how many students you can fit in a classroom. There's a high and a low. Taking those numbers and taking as many of those kids and putting them into the single classroom. So that's one method. The second method is to take a look at the overall square footage of the building and dividing that by a certain square foot per student. Each school, elementary, middle, or high school has a different square foot per student number that we use. That helps us to determine whether or not the building can support all of those students. In other words, are the common spaces, cafeteria, gymnasiums, corridors, all of those things, are they large enough to support the student population that you have? And both are important when you start to take a look at building capacity. You have to look at both together. So when we look at Forest Park, your current population is at 682. That method one, the one where we take as many students as possible and put them into those classrooms, ranges between the 847 and 1,008 students. Again, that's important to understand that we are taking all of those learning spaces, regardless of the size, and putting them in. We haven't looked at square footage to determine if that actually works. However, when you take a look at method two, that number is only 721. So you can see that the building area itself really doesn't support all of those students that we talked about in method one. For the high school, you're currently at 1433, and method one, again, taking all of the learning spaces, putting all those maximum students into those spaces, you're at 1570 to 1772. The actual building area, however, only supports 1294, which really wouldn't support what you have here right now. In other words, again, if you take a walk around and look at the spaces, for instance, the family and consumer ed spaces, your science rooms, things like that, those spaces are very small compared to what you should really be looking at for a facility like this.
You often hear 21st century learning talked about, and that really goes beyond what most people think of as just being technology. These are learning spaces that integrate and get away from the traditional putting kids in rows, but it gets them engaged in some creative thinking types of things and puts them in an environment where they're doing more of somewhat of their own learning, where they're sharing with people, where there's self-based and self-initiated projects going on. So the 21st learning is just not an easy acronym to throw out. It's what do our kids right now need to know, a first grader, for example, when they were to graduate from school, what kind of skills and things do they need to know? There's a lot of research out there that says those first graders right now, the jobs that those people will be entitled to or be looking at aren't even invented yet. So the future is one of those things that we have to take a look at in 21st century learning. The transitioning to the middle school, I mentioned earlier that the study indicated a 6-8 grade configuration, and we believe strongly that the 6-8 grade configuration is the best optimal learning for our 6th graders. Right now we try to adapt the best we can when we have our 6th graders in our elementary schools by bringing our middle school curriculum down to that level as best we can within the constraints that we have with those current schedules and so on. Our science labs and classrooms, as Bob said, particularly at the high school and middle school, they're very, very small. And for us to be able to offer the kids the kind of curriculum and the developmental procedures and knowledge bases that they need, we have to take a look at are those what are going to put our kids in the best situation to learn as their future goes forward. It's no secret our choral, orchestra, and performing arts areas, we really don't have one. This used to be one that we had to build some classrooms in here. Currently, when we have plays and so on, we rent the Greendale Auditorium. We have band concerts, gym, and so on and so forth. But in Franklin overall, in general, there isn't an ideal, what you would call an ideal performing place or opportunity for our kids in those particular areas. And our physical education and athletic spaces are something that we've had a number of people express concerns about, the condition of them, the size of them, and those kinds of things. So, and there are people that those kinds of things don't affect and don't matter to. So we got to fully understand that some people have interest in certain areas and some people have interest in other areas. In terms of fine arts and athletics, just some statistics that might be of interest to you. In terms of our fine arts programs that we are band, choir, and so on, plays, drama, we have 565 kids, this is middle and high school now, that are involved in those programs. These are different kids that are involved in various programs. We have 904 students who participate in activities in general. And that could range from anything from different sports teams to different club teams to forensics and so on and so forth. And so there are space needs when those opportunities come available for those kids. We have 1,294 kids, now that's this year, that were involved in athletics. Some of those are multiple sports people to be sure, but we do have a high participation rate among students at our middle and our high schools. And one note that we want to make you aware of is we currently use our elementary buildings a lot for after-school practices. We have kids practicing in our elementary buildings at 9 o'clock at night because we don't have the space and so on. But those are the kinds of things that we deal with in terms of utilizing the space that we have to the best of our ability, but it does mean some sacrifice on parents and kids and so on, where they have to use those spaces on the available times. We have a lot of teams. We have several basketball, several baseball, those kinds of things where we have to share different facilities. Physical education, athletic field improvement additions. 9 of our athletic teams currently practice and in some cases participate in game-like conditions off campus. We don't have tennis courts on this campus. We don't have a softball field on this campus, on those kinds of things. The aging building system upgrades are something that if you were to walk into our pool locker room area, they are not in very good condition. And they need to have some improvements made or some upgrades made, in part because of safety, part of ADA requirements and so on and so forth. And then the last point up there, if you're ever around here on a night where there's an activity, you realize the parking activities that we have and the problems that we have. We have people parking all over. And we get a fair amount of input from people in the neighborhoods yelling at us to find a way to resolve it. There's just not a way to resolve it. I mean, Mike even goes through a pretty hair-pulling exercise each year in terms of issuing parking passes to kids. Matter of fact, this year, I think, or next year, we won't even have enough for the seniors. Is that right, Mike?
Probably not enough for all seniors next year, right?
And so it's going to be turning into a little bit of a parking problem. At the middle school, for those of you that are brave enough to go there at about 7:45 in the morning and about 3:15 in the afternoon, it's really a difficult situation for a lot of people. And I can look out my office, and I've seen 2 accidents this year. Nothing major, but I think it's something we have to take a look at. Is there a better way to do it? And certainly if we do anything with that building, that would be one of the things that would be something that we consider. One of the things that we found over the years is that there are not a lot of people that recognize that our rec department is part of our school district. It is not a city activity. It's a rather large, complex part of our school district. And one person I'd also like to introduce with that is Brad Anderson. Brad, where are you at? You stand up at the back there. Brad's the head of our rec department. And the rec department services an awful lot of people, and we spend, I think, millions of hours doing this. But you can see on there that we had an occupancy in terms of utilizing our rec department activities of over 12,000 people, the classes that were taught, and the hours that we teach to the community. This isn't a part of our kids going out there and using the gym space or whatever. This is, once again, going into our elementary buildings, using available classrooms if they're there, and those kinds of things for community activities. I think you all probably get the brochure in the mail every year of the courses that are being offered, and those are all throughout our school district, and we have to find a space to provide that for them. Okay, it's time for us to get down to getting less talking out of us and a great deal of talking out of you. The World Cafe method is pretty simple. I hope you'll enjoy it and take advantage of it. Basically, at your table right now, you have a group of people that we want you to all have the opportunity to give input. We're going to provide you with 3 basic questions, and they're general in nature. You can expand them to your thinking however you want, and anything that you would like us to record, we will do that. And in the end, there's a placard on each table, or if you have additional questions that you want to ask us, put them down, and we will make sure we get them answered. We know sometimes people want to sit at those tables and absorb, and they don't want to comment, and that's fine. Please don't feel obligated, but if you do have something to say, please say it, and no fist fights or anything. If you disagree with somebody, just let it go and speak your point of view. And that's going to happen because there are certainly diverse opinions on what people think we should do and can do and ought to do, and that's all right, but that's something we have to learn from tonight. When we're done with question number 1, we'll be taking a microphone to each table. This is only going to take about a minute at each table at the max, and ask the people, the reporters that are there, to tell us what the themes of your table were. Some of the comments you made. Now, you don't have to verbatim read everything, and the people at these tables have been through this before, so they know sort of what's going on. And then we'll go to the next table. When we get to that table, we're not going to repeat everything. If there were a lot of things that were said at the previous table, that will be acknowledged, and then we'll just move on so we can get as much input as we can. After that's done, and this goes pretty quickly, the questioning part of it for each question is about 15 minutes, the report out is 10 minutes max, and then we would like you to get up and move around so you're not sitting with the same people. It's important that you see a diverse idea of opinions that different people have, and oftentimes they'll say some things or maybe give you something to think about that might be important, and we would appreciate that. And so we'll do that 3 times, and then that's it. And then we're going to take all that information, we'll process it through several meetings in the next couple of weeks, we'll post all that information up on the web, and then we'll take that information with our architects and so on and build a plan of sorts, at least conceptually, for our meeting on March 19th. And then we'll have as many more community engagement sessions as we need to. And you're always welcome to call us, to email us, whatever, with your thoughts, no matter what they are, so that we have them and consider them. So with that, we're going to go into the first question. The first question is this: what do you want district facilities to provide for students and the community? Now that's a real broad question, but if you were just sitting there and say, I think our facility should be able to do what? Maybe you're a believer that our community rec program needs to expand or maybe decrease, whatever it might be. It's your opinion on what you think our facility should be able to do. For example, there might be other school districts in the state that you're aware of or in our neighboring areas that have certain things that we don't. Well, we want to hear what you think is important for our district to have in terms of facilities. So with that, I'm going to ask you to start your conversation. The monitors at the table will give you a little bit of direction.